Hey there, metal and heavy music fans. If you're a fan of melodic death metal legends, the Black Dahlia Murder, I've got 5 more bands you need to check out right now. But before I do that, if you want to stay updated on the best and brightest bands and albums from the underground and above, stick with me, Flight of Icarus of MetalTrenches.com, by clicking that subscribe button down below. I upload new content every single week. Let's get started. First up, we've got the band that inspired me to make this list to begin with. It's Richmond, Indiana's Carrion Vale, deeply channeling the Black Dahlia Murder on their new album God Killer via Horror, Pain, Gore, Death. Now, I know that some musicians deeply resent the constant comparisons and idea of FFO lists in general, but bands like Carrion Vale should be thankful for the free marketing, honestly. When the connection is to an almost universally loved band like the Black Dahlia Murder, embracing some of that name brand recognition often translates to free reach off an already massive fan base. In a way, it serves the same purpose as a really eye-catching thumbnail, getting your foot in the door. The key is making sure that that initial click lives up to the hype, and thankfully, Carrion Vale's draw goes far beyond the superficial. Yes, God Killer features a very familiar take on ominous melodic guitar hooks, and especially Trevor-esque alternations between brutal growls and throat-ripping blackened snarls, the latter of which are honestly uncanny. However, Carrion Vale employ all of these now classic modern melodeath tropes in such a pristinely calculated manner as to at times eclipse some of the Black Dahlia Murder's more recent output. Honestly, if I dropped this album into the band's tier list, I'd sit it up there with the likes of Ritual and Nocturnal. I'm even willing to wager that if the Black Dahlia Murder put this out on Metal Blade and claimed it as their own, none of us would be the wiser. The thrashy, insanely catchy riffs and lightning pace of tracks like Inception, Strokes of Goya, and Moonchild Ritual perfectly scratch the same itch as the first time I pressed play on Unhallowed over 15 years ago. No slouching on the solos either. Seriously, if you can listen to God Killer even halfway through without an urge to hit that buy button, there's really no hope for you. Alright, next up, arguably the most obvious band to include on this list, it's Sacramento, California's Alterbeast. I was particularly fond of their last album, Feast, via Unique Leader Records. I hadn't really previously been following Alterbeast, but they seem to be one of those bands that are just easy to drop into. Their style is more than a little similar, obviously, to the Black Dahlia Murder, albeit on a more technical level. Feast relies heavily on the same kind of melodeath hooks and grooves that made albums again like Ritual, and more recently Nightbringer's such massive hits. And in addition to the core riffs, Alterbeast love neoclassical solos. Fans of groups like Ex Mortis should also rejoice at the sheer volume of these extended shredding sessions. Production is solid, and I also dig the vocal variation. This band comes fast and furious and has been dropping tight little albums that pack a punch and don't overstay their welcome. I could really see these guys definitely going to a higher tier in the near future. Next up, we've got Southern New Hampshire band Begat the Nephilim. These guys dropped an amazing album in 2018 in The Surreptitious Prophecy, Mother of the Blasphemy, via Unholy Anarchy Records. These guys basically sound like the bastard child of the Black Dahlia Murder and Irreversible Mechanism. The guitar hooks and vocals are straight out of the former, but with the more technical edge and synth elements of the latter. Tyler really does sound quite a bit like Trevor, what with his charismatic schizoid alternations again between the wretched shrieks and brutal growls. There's even some guttural stuff for good measure. Comparisons aside, his performance is very strong and certainly a focal point of the band's energy and accessibility. Much of that album relies on similar campy, blackened melodies as classics like Miasma, but there are also some breakout moments of tech death that add a signature touch to the proceedings. Speaking of which, the other standout element of this album is the very Karish Angren Flesh God Apocalypse sounding synth work. The piano, strings, and harpsichord really do elevate things to the next level in terms of both composition and atmosphere. It's death metal played for vampires in a gothic castle. And while I tend to be critical of bands in this genre making attempts at longer, more progressive tracks, Mobbin really knocks it out of the park. Thanks to tight songwriting and even tighter performances, this 7.5-minute ripper quickly became one of my favorites on the album. Seriously, Begat the Nephilim are just right for a midnight concert in Transylvania. I'm sure that Nosferatu himself would be in attendance. Alright, then we've got Philadelphia band Piraeus. I was particularly fond of this band's 2017 EP Let There Be Light, but more recently they dropped The Eldritch Realm in 2018. These guys again feature fun riffs and a nice balance of thrashy speed and melody. Some of the guitar hooks have a kind of the haunted vibe going on. The vocals maintain a nice range between, again, both high and low screams, a trend we're seeing on this list, and rightly so, because obviously that's sort of a trademark of the Black Dahlia Murder's sound. The way in which Piraeus seamlessly navigates between all of these styles along with the integration of strings is well exemplified on some of their earlier material. And aside from the lead guitar being fantastic, there's also some standout moments with the bass that are truly delectable in their rumblings. And not only do these guys sound quite a bit like the Black Dahlia Murder, but they've actually had guest solos from Ryan Knight himself. To top it all off, I really dig their aesthetic. That later album, The Eldritch Realm, has a great kind of campy album cover to it. Brings back memories of kind of watching old horror movies. Very schlocky, and you'll definitely have a good time with these guys. Alright, and last but not least, I could not end this list without paying tribute to a band that I've mentioned many times before, and that's New York's The Hudson Horror. And I'm kind of cheating by including this one because I tried to stick to active bands, and the Hudson Horror is no longer making new music, at least of right now. But for one, they were one of the first albums I heard on Bandcamp that really stood out to me as just still capturing that intense The Black Dahlia Murder vibe. But not only that, I've become good friends with the vocalist Dan over the years, and you can even hear the beginning of the song What the Moon Brings on the intro of all of our videos and the podcast. In any case, these guys deliver some truly epic guitar leads and absolutely pounding drums that are a real treat. The instrumentation is glorious in scope, and there's a strong foundation of melodic death metal and thrash metal here, but also brutal and blackened death metal influences as well. I tend to associate these very kind of Babylonian sounding riffs with Behemoth too, and there are quite a few of those marching through the mix with banners fully waving. I'm particularly fond of their debut album Nemesis, but they also followed that up with a shorter EP called Ruiner. The range in the vocal performance is very strong, the high screeches reminiscent of also kind of At the Gates at times, while the lows are every bit as brutal as Corpse Grinder himself. Both the drumming and bass work are also solid, and it's also mentioning that tracks like Anathema and Heretic often reminded me of Wages of Sin era Arch Enemy, which you can't go wrong with that. Again, I know they're not active right now, but you definitely need to check these guys out because especially, again, that debut Nemesis is really fantastic. And obviously, I liked it enough to want to eternally make it part of my content from the very beginning. And that'll do it, guys. 5 bands that you need to check out if you're a big fan like I am of the Black Dahlia Murder. And that'll do it for this video, but don't go anywhere because there is so much more for you to get into. If you enjoyed this list, there are other for fans of lists up right now for bands like Skeleton Witch and Behemoth, and also dozens and dozens of just underground metal recommendations for you to sink your teeth into. So again, please do subscribe to the channel. Also in the description, you can find links to all of our social media, the email newsletter I send out personally every Friday, and and also our Patreon and Subscribe Star if you want to make that extra leap to become a supporter of our content. Most importantly though, if you enjoyed this, please like the video and leave a comment. That really helps YouTube know that, hey, people are interested in this, and then it shares it out to other people and therefore gives more exposure to these bands that they so desperately deserve. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.